So I'm not clear. Did you want me to start right away, or are you waiting for folks to join in first?
Sorry. Yeah, we're gonna get some. We're gonna open it and get some people, let people trickle in for a second, and then our host will introduce everybody, and our moderator will say a couple words and kick it off. So sorry about that.
Okay, so we're gonna get started. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for our panel, Journey of Places. Hope if you came back after that lunch break, hope you had a really good lunch. One of the organizers said, hope you got to enjoy the sun outside. It's actually pretty warm, so I do, during our breaks, I do recommend to go outside and take a little walk, just bask in the sun. So the theme Journey of Places, this panel will approach questions surrounding culturally appropriate planning, where we're going, what we're prioritizing, and what we should be prioritizing in planning. So this panel will be moderated by Shauna McGowan, who is a first-year Master of Planning student and the Secretary of the Graduate Planning Society here at Dalhousie. Her planning interests include social and transportation planning with a focus on accessibility. And our panelists are Meaghan Dalton, who is a community developer for HRM's Parks and Recreation Department. She has a background in planning, politics, and research. As a community developer, Meaghan supports grassroots groups, harness their passion, skills, and community assets to create positive change in their communities. She supports groups with strategic planning, board development, and community engagement, and through capacity building programs such as Neighbourhood Placemaking, Community Gardens, Step Up to Leadership, a volunteer training program, and the annual HRM Volunteer Conference. Meaghan also supports the Parks and Recreation Department with expertise in community engagement and outreach. Thank you, Meaghan, for joining us. Our next panelist is Treno Morton, who is a graduate of Queen's University with a degree in geography and planning, a certificate in planning, and a minor in global development studies. His goal is to use his education to counteract the gentrification he's seen plaguing not only his own community, but countless other Black and underrepresented communities across Canada. Treno also has experience working with and advising local community groups, nonprofit organizations, and government corporations. He is also the co-owner and creative director of Fumes Rolling Papers Incorporated, a Black-owned and operated rolling paper company founded by his brother and himself to help reestablish Black ownership in the cannabis industry. Thank you so much, Treno, for joining us. And our third panelist for this panel is Tammy Ewing, who is dedicated to advocating for and lifting up opportunities that help people overcome challenges faced by Nova Scotia communities. She is inspired by working with those who believe in a Nova Scotia that offers a sense of belonging for all. Tammy understands the importance of hearing from those who are traditionally overlooked and is passionate about seeking equity for all Nova Scotians. Tammy has been part of the active transportation work from the beginning in 2017, when the first group formed, the Rural Access to Physical Activity. She continues working alongside others to further this work and is now co-chair of the East Preston Active Transportation Committee. Thank you all for coming. And a reminder to our conference attendees that for all your questions, you go on Slido and enter the code SHIFT2022. And it's a platform that lets you ask questions anonymously. So feel free to ask away. I'm going to pass it to Shauna, who will get it along.
Thank you very much for the introductions. So just to reiterate, this panel is the Journey of Places. So we will be looking at approaching questions around culturally appropriate planning, where we're going, what we should be prioritizing, and what we're currently prioritizing. So the three panelists were presented 4 guiding questions, which were: what kind of world is planning trying to make? How do we make sure that we are being culturally appropriate when we are planning? What are we prioritizing, and what should we be prioritizing? And whose culture and heritage are we preserving with planning? And so Meaghan, if you could kindly start.
All right, happy to start. So my name is Meaghan Dalton. So I'm a community developer under HRM's Parks and Recreation Department. And when Melissa, who was on the conference planning committee, reached out to me, she sent along some questions and the topic of Journey of Places. And I had to figure out for a bit what that meant to me and how that relates to my work that I do as a community developer. So this is my take on the topic. So when I think about a place, we do placemaking as part of our work. And the way we define a place is it's a space embedded with value. So space plus value. And where does that value come from? It comes from the human experiences of those spaces. So really what we're talking about when we talk about a place is the value or the stories that people have to tell about those places. So because the work that I do focuses more on community groups and residents, I'm going to focus on the importance of people's stories about places and how in the work that we do, we think that resident empowerment and capacity building is necessary for any type of community engagement that is trying to get to the bottom of what to do with a place. So based on the questions I was given and the topic of this being journeys, I thought I'd start by giving some context and explain my journey of becoming a community developer. So I was doing my undergrad in political science and found myself studying for my honors thesis, the decay and renewal of downtown Dartmouth. I grew up in downtown Dartmouth and watched it very quickly gentrify during my early adult years. There used to be several rooming houses and ample social services in the community for those facing unstable housing or living situations or mental illness, but slowly one by one, rooming houses were closed, demolished and replaced with condos, beer bars, and cafes. And I love coffee as much as the next person, but I didn't know what to make of this trend I was seeing. So I decided to spend my honors thesis trying to hear all the voices that are affected by this. So what I did was I interviewed people from various backgrounds about how these changes were affecting them. So I was hearing their stories about this journey of a place. So I heard stories about residents being slowly pushed further and further from the downtown where the services they relied on were. I also witnessed tense moments where latte drinkers were not being very respectful of nearby soup kitchen users who had been using the service in the area for a long time. As a 20-year-old, I didn't really know what I could do with this information, but I at least wanted to amplify the voices that were perhaps being overshadowed by the more prominently heard celebrations of things like economic development, beautification, and safety, without any real recognition of our neighbors being pushed from their homes. So then I spent 2 years studying planning at Dalhousie to understand the intent and history of planning, as well as the shortcomings, barriers, and challenges with planning. I then spent a few very informative years working as a planner and basically got a crash course in understanding bylaws, policies, the government decision-making process, and got to work on some really interesting projects that affected places across all of HRM. All of these projects required some form of community outreach, engagement, or consultation, but there were many factors that made this hard. A big one being resident apathy, which really was about resident distrust, frustration, barriers to participation, or maybe a lack of confidence in interacting with the municipality due to decades or centuries even of disenfranchisement, underrepresentation, and the fact that our governance systems in Canada are based on a colonial system that is not inclusive to all. And on the other hand, I was very used to hearing, the squeaky wheel getting the grease. So those who were more used to interacting with the municipality, getting their voices heard all the time. So when the opportunity came up to be a community developer, I went for it, and it brought me full circle back to hearing the stories of residents. But this time taking those stories a step further to not just amplifying them, but to build relationships and trust so that residents would know their stories are really being heard, and to even go a little bit further to build confidence and skills in residents so that perhaps they can realize that they can make change in their communities with those skills. So coming back to where I started with the idea that place equals space plus embedded value, or those stories, those human stories about spaces, a lot of what I work on is engaging residents for decision-making that affects places. So to understand what is a culturally appropriate or context sensitive when we're making decisions, data collection is important and research on best practices is important, but we need to know the stories behind the places to ensure that the value of those places is not overlooked. And when we hear those stories about places, we understand that every place is unique and cannot be treated with just a one-size-fits-all best practice or like common planning approach. So I just wanted to tell a few examples of the stories plus spaces, or spaces plus stories that I've come to know in my so far just short 2 years as being a community developer. So for example, I've worked with a community group trying to sustain a local hall that has been the site of weekly jamborees and passionate community discussions for over 50 years. I had the experience of going on a tour with a community group in a rural park and learning about the special tree that is apparently the largest tree in HRM that the community cherishes and the kids have their birthday parties under. I learned and I witnessed, working out of a rec center, the hill in the urban park where everyone grows up sledding. Also working at the rec center, I got to hear where my peers went through the youth leadership program, and those were such formative years for them. I experienced working with the community garden group where newcomers shared farming knowledge with their neighbors, or the street where every neighbor came together to paint a mural that meant something to them, and where I heard longtime neighbors make connections for the first time. And then most recently, chatting with residents in a commercial parking lot in a rural village because there isn't a public facility to gather. So these stories are integral, in my opinion, to decision-making that affects places. We don't want to unknowingly destroy places of importance, but how can we understand their importance without building relationships? And that means traveling to communities, making your face known, doing the uncomfortable of going into the local bakery and gas station and saying hello to folks at the parking lot and saying who you are and what you do and how you can support them. So I can't understand the importance of specific places from my office. I have to get out there. So people are the experts of their places, but how can we build those relationships so that more residents are willing to share their stories about those places? Because a lot of people feel a sense of distrust or frustration or apathy with sharing those stories with the government. So how can we break that cycle? How can we show residents that they can make change in their community and that their voices can be heard? This is where our role as a community developer comes in. So I'll just go over quickly what we do, which is really two parts. We do capacity building, and then we support our own department with leading engagement strategies for policy decisions. So the examples of what we do is we support community-led projects with programs like neighborhood placemaking and community gardens. We facilitate workshops with groups trying to make change in their community by doing training, board development, or strategic planning. We teach community groups how to engage their community and how to create a community profile so that when they're making decisions from their organization, they can work towards the best for the public good. We teach skills around leadership, teamwork, deliberation, and how to work through difficult conversations. And most of all, again, we go to them. So we travel, even if it is an hour, to those communities to get to know residents. We meet up with the organizations, we work with the local schools, and we go to community roundtable meetings. And then just as an example of the types of work we do that revolves around places is we're working on a rural recreation strategy, recreation center redevelopment plans, community art, parkland development, asset mapping, and then supporting other departments with their work. So our role really comes down to two parts, and I realized it's a bit of a cycle that feeds into each other. So we try in an ideal world to build up more engaged residents so that when we are having to engage residents for decision making, we can do a better job of that because more people are willing to take part. And so really the hope is that we're creating, a slightly more participatory decision-making process or democracy. So I know I talked a lot about working with people, but without the human experience, a place is just a space. There are no stories, so we don't talk about them. So I hope my 2 cents of what a journey of place can mean is of value to this conversation. And I look forward to hearing from Tammy and Treno. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Meaghan. Really appreciate it. Honestly, I think it's fantastic, just to highlight the importance of people and how they connect to spaces and places, and just understanding that we can't just, there's no way to separate them. Like people and places, they're connected in planning. I thought that was really, really good. Thank you very much. And we will send the floor over to Treno.
Thank you. Just getting everything up here. Thank you, Meaghan. For myself, I took the same approach that you did, just use the guiding questions as a way to shape my responses, and just, I put a slide together just to have something so people had something nice to look at. And I also plan on speaking to the image later on in my presentation. But as you heard in my bio, I'm Treno Morton. I work for Inspiring Communities as a community engagement specialist. A lot of my work is focused around climate change reduction at the moment. I previously worked for HRM. I worked with the Center Plan team in 2019. I did a lot of community engagement work for them. I worked for the One North End. I helped them develop and expand their Black youth database, which purpose was to decrease unemployment for ANS youth in Nova Scotia. I previously worked for Triangle Strategies Consultant, where they use more of my consulting expertise. And now at Inspiring Communities, it's more of the same. For me, I got into planning because, like I said in my bio, I just grew up in Uniacke Square, predominantly Black community, often overlooked. And I just watched it over the years kind of just deteriorate in front of my eyes, basically. Just the sense of community and what it once was just changed drastically, year after year. I just always felt as though people of color or people who lived in my area were second-class citizens or treated as lesser than. And for me personally, like I said, nothing emphasized that more than just the gentrification happening. And like I said, just watching that get taken away from our community. I knew that acquiring knowledge and the experience was the only way to counteract the issue. And thankfully, I was fortunate enough to do both, just gain lived experience, as well as further my education and get a background in planning and be able to understand those conversations. And as a result, be able to be at the table impact those decisions, because not many people that look like myself are able to. And I think that's goes into more of the second guiding question that I plan to speak to, just having individuals at the table that are directly impacted by issues. But the first question was, what world was planning trying to create? And I kept it specific to Halifax. And for me, it feels as though planning in Halifax is trying to create a world that favors the elite and wealthy and individuals who can afford expensive rents and luxury apartments and things like that. And I think proof of that is the increasing temp population in Halifax due to those prices. Additionally, it feels as though planning in Halifax is creating a world of exclusion and, like I said, exclusion and luxury. And it's just been getting more and more dramatic, like I said, with the increasing temp population. I know myself, just the apartment hunt has been getting more and more difficult. Just planning to buy a house, it's getting just like drastic. Also, just based on my lived experience, I've seen gentrification engulf my community. And when you think back to like just lived examples, I know where the Velo building is across from the North Branch Public Library, a place that I frequented often growing up. There used to be, it was a parking lot in the green fields. I used to go through the field almost daily with my mom on my way to daycare. And like I said, over time, you just kind of watch, it starts with buildings and stores pop up that don't really reflect the views or beliefs of community. And then it kind of transferred into rental properties and these luxurious apartments. And like I said, it looks on the outside for individuals not from the area, it's a building popping up or something like that. But for myself, it's much more, and people from the community, it's a lot more. It's spaces being taken away, it's memories being taken away. It's not just a piece of land or an area. I've also seen, like as a result of all this, you also see like a lack of mixed housing, or like it further decreasing in Halifax. Affordable housing is definitely something we need to focus on a lot more. And like I said, for stores, it's been a lot of the same. Stores that open up attached to these buildings often don't reflect the needs or wants of the local community, but instead are made for the influx of usually white tenants in the building. I also have yet to see a store in these buildings that's owned by a local Black resident from my community. We have pop-up shops and stuff like that, events that my business takes place in, like Taking Black Godigan, where we're able to occupy these spaces and businesses, but never anything permanent. Another example that speaks to my personal experience is my brothers and I, like you guys heard, like everyone heard, we have our rolling paper company, and we just became the first local Black-owned company in NSLC, which really wasn't a surprise to us. We were surprised they had other Black-owned items in there, but we weren't surprised to be like the first local Black-owned product in there. And that itself just took a lot of trying and a lot of pushing and barriers and just getting that started. Just a lot of looks and stares. You get the same ones you get from people moving into these buildings. They stare at longtime residents like we're the outsiders, and oftentimes there's little, if any, attempt to interact with residents. It's just kind of, like I said, it goes back to being looked at as lesser than or as outsiders or not belonging, even though you're the one who's lived there for decades. Still speaking to question one, I've also had experience with developers like Ross Cantwell, who's responsible for the Velo building, just tell me things like people who live in my community are responsible for putting themselves in these situations, as opposed to looking at the broader context and the IPP systems, which put a lot of Black youth on or in these classes that aren't applicable for universities. And oftentimes there's not communication with the parents about this until you get to grade 12 and it's time to graduate and you can't go to university. So, and oftentimes it's because these parents are just working 2 jobs or whatever the case is just to make ends meet for their children. So I feel like that goes back to, like I said, just having diverse individuals with lived experience, not just academic experience at the table and impacting these conversations and decisions. I think I'm finally to question 2 almost. Trying to be quick. Question 2 was, how do we make sure that we're being culturally appropriate when planning? And I think it just goes back to what I've been saying so far, just getting individuals, diverse individuals at the table, taking a more collective impact approach to things. And by that, I mean having community members at the table, as well as government officials and individuals that can impact change, but start at the beginning of a project, not when it's partially completed or pretty much completed. So you're going in just to check a box. I think you should take the time to build something collectively. And like I said, especially if it's impacting a specific group of people, don't just impose something on them or force something on them, especially a group that's had so many things enforced and imposed on them for decades already. Sorry. And just going back to my planning experience, I think we have to look at the bylaws and just updating those and who they're in place to, who they favor and like who they're in place to favorably impact. Affordable housing, like I said, that should definitely be at the forefront of conversations with everything taking place in Halifax at the moment. It goes back to diverse conversations, but if the bylaws aren't updated or the bylaws in place can't make those changes happen, then it's just a lot of the same, which has been putting pins in projects or saying how great something looks on the face of it, but it doesn't happen for years, and oftentimes it's forgotten in the work, or it doesn't actually come to fruition. So I think that's why it's just important to have people who are passionate about the work and who aren't going to forget about the work at the table and impacting those bylaws and helping update them and taking into account lived experiences, things that otherwise might not be taken into account by individuals who lack that lived experience or just lack that lived experience. What are we prioritizing and what should we be prioritizing? To myself, the city's been prioritizing expensive developments and contracts over the well-being of residents and the character of Halifax. I frequent an office near Canard Street often, and just in that area alone, there's a building popping up now, actually, and there's one that was built fairly recently, and both of them just look so dramatically different from the surrounding area, and that's been the case for everything popping up recently near my community and just in Halifax in general. Like I said, it's just been all luxury apartments and high rent prices, and like I said, it doesn't take into account people's wages, what certain individuals have to live off, their lived experiences, what they had to undergo, and what they currently face, and just other issues like that. I think prioritizing and maintaining the heritage of African Nova Scotian culture should be more of a priority in Halifax. Just with the long history of Africville, the displacement of its residents, it's something that a lot of individuals in my community know, mainly because it's them and their families that's been impacted and directly misplaced or displaced from the area. We're familiar with it, but I find not far from beyond my community, many people don't know the story. And as just, I don't know what the word is, but just as wrong as that was, and just displacing so many people, bulldozing their homes, and just to establish a garbage dump where that once would, and to have no reparations or anything like that, for them to have to undergo legal battles and all those other issues. I just think it's really sad that there's nothing to honor them except the church that once stood there, that was like reestablished by the community, I believe, to be a museum in the Africville area. But outside of that, like I previously said, it's a lot of pop-ups and stuff like that. There's nothing permanently established that reflects my culture, ANS culture. Also, just speaking to Africville, there's no way to easily access Africville, and the closer you get to it, the less accessible it gets. Like the closer you get to it, the less and less sidewalk you have to walk on, to the point where you're literally just walking on the side of the road. And I think it's just little things like that and indirect forms of racism like that that just shows Black people and other minorities in this city how just how they're not cared about. And like I said, it speaks to that how we're treated like second-class citizens in Halifax, in the past and still to this day, just a lot more subtly, I always say. And like I said, not just access on foot, that's access by buses when it's a beautiful area to access. And like I said, it's one of the few places where you can access like ANS culture and history in Halifax. And like I said, the lack of access just kind of speaks to the importance of it to the city. Something else I wanted to speak to quickly was just, there are a lot of initiatives that try to be undertaken, but it's rallying support, and oftentimes rallying support from people that don't look like you and don't understand your history. So that's why I keep reiterating having individuals with that lived experience at the table, not just degrees. This is, oh, sorry. Can you hear me okay? Sorry. Okay, they were saying they couldn't hear me. Anyway, an example I was going to speak to is just a local artist named Aaliyah Paris, who wanted to do the Black Lives Matter spray painting, not just in 2 places in the city, but just across Halifax and different local cities on local streets. But the only issue she was having was just garnering protection for that, to make sure there was no legal action taken against her and stuff like that. She brought her proposal to the mayor, or to the city, but it was declined. And eventually the mayor had city workers do it, when her initial plan and her proposal was having Black artists, queer and Black artists, do the paintings. And like I said, it turned out being done by the mayor and city workers in 2 different places, as opposed to having it done in numerous places across the city by people who are directly impacted by the issue, as opposed to just another thing done as a result to a tragic event. In that case, the death of, well, the murder of George Floyd. So just little things like that. It goes back to just supporting individuals in those endeavors as well. And yeah, that's my presentation.
Honestly, thank you very much. Really, genuinely, really do appreciate you sharing your lived experiences, both positive and negative, in your community. Yeah, no, I definitely look forward to hearing you more in the Q&A session talking about that. Really appreciate it. And I will now hand over the mic to Tammy.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. Sorry, I'm just getting distracted for a second. So sorry. Yeah, so anyways, I'm happy to be here. I only caught some of what Treno was saying, but it resonated very, very deeply. And my angle of conversation around this will not come in as as professionally in that sense because I'm not in that line of work, but having been working with community to achieve some of these very things and how we have noticed a lot of those same things that Treno has mentioned in our goal to achieve better for our community. So as a bit of background, I'll just share a little bit about how I got involved with community building and change making as it relates to planning. I live in the beautiful, beautiful community of East Preston. But when I and others recognize some of the deficits within the, as it regards walkability in the community, we realized that there was things that needed to happen. And so that was really a really simple place to start doing some of this change making work. And some of the reasons for that safe walking, ability to safely walk within the community is partly due to the rough conditions of the shoulder of the road, partly due to the fact that we're still considered a highway going through. So the main road is a highway going through a community, which baffles me every time I say it. And this is even after a highway was built outside of the community for more efficient commuting. Another factor has been changed since, but it was a 70-kilometer-an-hour speed. And these are just a few of the things. It's now been decreased to 50, but try telling the drivers that. So with these challenges being, something that was sort of more prominent to us, and we're people who have lived in this community for years. And it's not that we didn't know this before. We just got to a point where we were recognizing it more for what it actually is or could be. So some of these changes led to me working with a group of people who wanted to change these things as much as I do and did. So this group subsequently started working with other community members and even others outside of our community, but were the right fit for their goal was, let's look at better accessibility for rural communities. It wasn't just East Preston, it just grew into East Preston because of two of us in that group being from East Preston. Nonetheless, as we were coming together, planning, strategizing, and trying to figure out where we needed to start, who are some of the people we needed to bring to the table in these conversations, we recognized that it had to be decision makers. And sometimes we feel like, why do we always have to ask permission? But at the end of the day, we got to go with what's in place in that moment. So that's what we did. We met with and had conversations with some of these decision makers at various levels. Many were government, many were not. We wanted to make sure that they saw and understood the importance of a positive impact that could be made by making some of these changes that we wanted. And so some of these conversations, many of them actually, was around planning and with those in that profession. So in those conversations, we came to realize very quickly that some of the standards and considerations in planning don't allow for to take into account the community history, the significance of what is important to those people as it pertains to heritage and its surroundings. So as I said, I'm going to specifically be speaking more to East Preston. So in East Preston, the residents are predominantly Black, African Nova Scotians, and whose families have been here living and thriving for many, many years. And the history and culture is so rich. And that should always be factored into planning, regardless of what it's planning for. For instance, as we are preparing to make some more changes, we're looking to get a greenway designed and built in East Preston. This is to start somewhere to allow there to be some safer, pleasant walking option within the community. So in that, we're paying attention to what do people want? What would they want to see in this as a way of incorporating themselves and the heritage, the richness? And so a lot of what's coming up is they want, as it's being planned out, they want it to be deliberately paid attention to places where there could be placemaking. So like having benches, but they're not just benches where you can sit and have a break. Yes, they can be that, but it's about sitting at that bench and seeing that there's a little something there that designates this bench to, someone who's, a family or someone who's contributed greatly in the history and making of this community to be what it is. Plaques that are set up for the same purpose, to pay tribute to those who have put so much into this community and made it what it is today. Also, as we're thinking about changes to the roads, we're not only paying attention to the residents who naturally come to mind, like the children and able-bodied, because those in our conversations, they seem to be the first ones that come to mind. But we think about the seniors. Many seniors, and not only seniors, but many seniors, they're not as mobile as they used to be. So we need to be paying attention to what it looks like for them. And so we're having conversations with them, and some of what's come up with that has been around, they refer to it as back in the day. And I'm sure we've all heard that phrase. So back in the day for them means being able to walk around the community, go to their cousin, friend, neighbor, who may not be that close in distance, but they felt that they could get around more safely back in those days because things were better considered then. East Preston is a community, as I said, and we know this, but it's not always considered in the grand scheme of things when changes are being considered, planning is being considered. And so again, with the seniors, they're saying that, we could do that. People that drove through the community, they did that because they came through driving at a speed that was reasonable and safe and with regard for the people as residents of a community, not just a street that takes them from point A to point B. So in this, I say all that because some of the things have been changed over decades, but sadly, when we think of the norm, it denies opportunities to enhance a space, whether it be structurally, placemaking, or in land development. The way things were done and the reasoning behind it many years ago are not necessarily applicable now. So when we're having conversations, it's almost like we're trying to have people's minds shifted, like we have to sell it almost. And it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that we have to sell the fact that, the way you want to design this, whether it be the road or whether there's a crosswalk or whatever it is, you're really not thinking about the people, you're thinking about the traffic or the cars that travel, the vehicles that travel, and that's not how it should be. So anyway, that's one thing I wanted to make sure I got across. And again, so when I think of planning, I think it's important to always have it done with a lens of curiosity, a lens of respect and acknowledgement for those who are still here and those who have already, been living in a particular area. Taking time to research for yourself, speak directly with community members, gain a better sense of what is important to them, and take what is learned and apply it to the work by being curious and respectful. And what I mean is to just be with wonder. Don't come with any preconceived ideas of what it could or should be and sort of, okay, well, we listened to them, but we've already got this idea in the back of our head. So we're just going to go that route and try to incorporate a little of this. No, I mean, not assuming changing something based on what is maybe perceived to be a financial benefit or to attract a certain type of person to an area is the route to take. Talk to people, find out what's important to them, regardless of where you're at. And they'll tell you what's important to them in maintaining or improving the space that they live, work, and succeed in every day. They're growing, and this is what makes them whole. Some of the things that some people, whatever, might see as improving, others know as stripping of a history, taking away the reminders of what so many of them before have contributed to, making the current residents feel devalued. This also works in the reverse. As I said, I'm in East Preston. So not wanting to make changes needed to provide those improvements based largely on what a certain way of thinking about the work, doesn't take into consideration all that makes the community what it is, the people and their ancestors. So, for example, making a change look, to a building, the way a building looks, may be beautiful to look at, but how does it make the residents that are already there feel? I think I heard Treno, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard him mention, there are some who are of a certain income level. And so when we start, quote unquote, beautifying the structures within a certain area, place, community, that looks nice. But then all these other things happen that increase costs of everything around, and those people are driven out. And that's not okay. And so we need to, and it does happen to marginalized communities, the more vulnerable, all of the time. And maybe on purpose, maybe not. But the point being is that it needs to be more at the forefront of the mind when considering doing anything in any given area. One of the things that I wanted to touch on too is the fact that practices can be greatly improved just by applying a few basic yet impactful shifts in thinking. If it's applied to every project, idea, plan, or when planning and development is taking place, not only will there likely be more trust, but an acceptance to changes, but a mutual desire to succeed together. So again, I'll say it again, my home is East Preston. So I'm always using East Preston as an example because it's so near to my heart. But I definitely recognize that it's a priority. It should be a priority to incorporate culture and history in everything at all times. It should just be there at the top of mind every single time. Questions should be asking yourselves, what is the richness? What is the history of this particular area I'm working in? What are some things that if it were me, I would not want to make sure is lost in whatever is happening in the development or of the improvements. And I say improvements lightly because, again, what's improvements to one may not be improvements to another. Sometimes they actually are improvements by way of maybe something is really in desperate need of repair. And so with the repair comes a more sight to see, a beautiful sight to see. So, I'm not taking away any of that. It's just that it should always be considered, what does this mean to the people who are already here? Try as best you can to put yourself in the shoes of those who are there. Think about what you're seeing, what you're feeling when you're walking through a certain area, when you're driving through a certain area. Again, coming in on something Treno had mentioned, which is being treated like second-class citizens. Well, we in East Preston do not have an on-off ramp, if you will, to get out of the community. Why is that? I always wondered. A lot of us always wonder. So I started really paying attention when I became, like, as I said, more involved in this, trying to make a positive impact in change making for those things, active transportation and such in the community. I started really paying attention to, is it just us or is it just that we feel that way? So I took a drive from my exit in East Preston to further east, as far as you could go. We are the only exit that does not have a decent way to get in and out. We are, every time we get out, some people laugh in a not so funny manner and say, I'm on two wheels when I'm leaving the community because I'm just trying to get out before another car comes, because that's what it feels like. It was 100, and now it's 90 kilometers an hour, but that's still a lot. And people still don't do the max, they do more than that. And so we could be there forever trying to get out of our own community, and the same with trying to get in. Now, if there's not something related to race around that, I don't know what is. And so again, that's just another, and a very obvious for me, one example of how all these things are not culture, race, those things are not history, is not taken into account. There's a reason why us Black folk have this community out here. It's not because they thought we'd thrive. And I hate to put it bluntly like that, but that's exactly what that is what it is. But we have. And so now things are being built up, there's changes being made, and hey, I have nothing against change or being built up. But don't try to do it around us and leave us behind because you're not considering the things that are important to us as a people, to our history, and to our culture. Nothing for us without us. And I think that'll be it for me. Thanks.
That's excellent. No, thank you very much, Tammy. Honestly, what a key message, right? Just history of people and places, and you know, you had mentioned plaques and you know, just sort of integrating that history into, you know, our plans and landscapes and the design that we do. Yeah, I'm definitely taking away that we should be planning with curiosity, but you know, respecting history and you know, talking to community. I think it's really important. So thank you very much. We are going to move on to our Q&A session. So we have a few questions coming in here. Let's see what we can do here. So we'll start with Slido. All right, some questions. So the question is, what has your experience been in navigating policies and frameworks that are not meant to have you there?
I love the question, but I honestly, if Treno doesn't mind, and I'm picking on Treno because I caught some of his presentation and I've heard him speak before. I feel like maybe he should take this one. Okay, not hearing anything. I guess
No,
I'll,
my video wasn't working, but my
okay.
audio was. Sorry. No, I plan on speaking to it. Can you say the question again, sorry? It's just not wanting.
Yes, no, the question is, what has your experience been in navigating policies and frameworks that are not meant to have you there?
For myself, it's just, you're faced with a lot of rebuttal. So just a lot of pushback. So it's just, I'm constantly pushing for that change, speaking to why that change needs to be implemented. How people of color, like for me specifically, how people of color are impacted by the decision being made. And just, so for myself, when I'm in those situations, it's typically just a lot of explaining why the decision needs to be made. So that's how I navigate those. Just, yeah, it gets difficult at times, especially when it's in my community. In my time at HRM, I had coworkers tell me I just needed to be a little less passionate, but it's hard not to when it's directly impacting your community. And like I said, it's in the middle of the project instead of at the beginning. So like I said, it's just pushing for that change. Be prepared to be faced with that pushback, and yeah, just have those answers ready and tell them why that change needs to be implemented, and don't take no for an answer.
Thank you very much. We'll kind of build off that with the next question. What practices would you like to see become commonplace in planning activities?
I guess I'll just come back to the talking to the people. I think that should just, and I think again, see, this is why I gave it to Treno the first time, because he says it so well. It's about including people at the very beginning. It's not starting where we're, you know, at some level that's gone, you know, steps and steps and steps, and then working backwards. It's starting at, you know, with the groundwork, which should always include the people. So that's what I would say.
The biggest thing for myself would be what I've been highlighting all afternoon, just having individuals who have that lived experience at the table, not just degrees. And I know that's what it comes back to at the end of the day. You have to be educated to have this job. But like I said, when you're coming into a community, I always say those are the subject matter experts. Those are the people with the lived experience who've been impacted by the area and its conditions for decades. So don't come in and try to implement or force something on them. Work collectively with them to develop something that you're both proud of.
All right, There's one more question here. Now this was talked about by a bit. So gentrification, that beautification, who is it for? What about those developments and the people that are being displaced? So is there any cities in Canada that are successfully tackling challenges regarding gentrification, in your opinion, right? What could we learn from them if they are out there?
I guess I would just say I wish that there was a good case study to go off of, because I don't think I've really seen it. Like, there are lots of practices that are trying to improve, like I don't know, you hear about like community, I forget the terminology, but like hiring local people to do the work, but still it's not really, you're still hiring local people to do the work that might eventually still push them out anyway. So yeah, if anyone has seen a great case study, share it with us.
I know in some areas, it's been like the upweighting of bylaws or taxing vacant properties so that like they're rented or turned into space. But yeah, typically it's, I always say, like anything, it's just, like I said, getting those individuals involved. Not all the time can they have the outcome they want, but if they're at least a part of the conversation and they're guiding the scope of the project somewhat, then you'll have a community that's a lot happier with the end result as opposed to one that's been engaged midway through.
I guess too, I'll just add, I think a lot of it comes down to, like when I was thinking about this topic, like what's the voter turnout for municipal elections? It's like less than 40%. And so I think a lot of it comes down to people just feel so disenfranchised and frustrated that like there's no point in even engaging. But if we could, I think we need to like really do the proactive work of not just engaging when we're like almost at a decision for something to be made, but the proactive work of, you know, continuing to build up residents that feel empowered, that they have a voice. Like, I guess I sounded really negative in my first answer, but there are cases of communities that have formed like community trusts. There's a great case in, I think it's around Boston, where the community actually basically convinced the city to sell them land so that their area wouldn't be gentrified, and so that all the housing units would be basically owned by the community and kept at reasonable prices forever. But it seems to be pretty rare. But if we can, I think it really just comes down to that, like always trying to better the democratic process and getting people involved from the very start, like not the start of a project, like just always, like from the time you're born, understanding how it works and that you do have power. And, you know, we maybe could make more of a difference to, you know, it all comes down to elections and how you vote and that sort of thing. But I know it's so much to work through with, yeah, centuries of systemic racism and disenfranchisement and all of that. But I think that's what we need to keep working on. I don't think there is like a tool that can just like change it the way it works right now.
Yep, no, that makes sense. Honestly, really, I do appreciate everyone taking the time to do this panel, and we are right at the end here. So we will sign off, but I want to thank you all for being a part of this. And yeah, this was absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for those stories. We're gonna take a little break of 30 minutes and we'll be back at 3:30 for our last panel of the day. So take a little walk outside, enjoy the little sun, and we'll see you back at 3:30. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.